Action Northwest Indiana work group. I did want to announce that we will be recording today. So thank you, Flor, for starting that. So let's go ahead and get right into welcome and introductions as people kind of continue to trickle in. So welcome and thanks for being here. I would like to ask that, as we've done in the past, if everyone would please go ahead and introduce yourself, your name, and your organization, your affiliation in the chat. That would be really helpful for us to know who's in the room, and so that we can document that. While we're doing that, I'd like to go ahead and just kind of introduce the working team on this, the NIRPC and Earth Charter folks who are in the room working on this project. I am Jen Birchfield. I'm the Natural Resources Planner with NIRPC, and I'll go ahead and introduce some other folks from NIRPC. We do have Flor Baum in the room. She's the one who kind of helped to set up the Zoom and is helping on all of that technical stuff. So thank you, Flor. We do have Kevin Paulette, who's also here with NIRPC in the room. And last but not least, Kathy Luther, my boss. Do you want to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the environmental director here at NIRPC, and I am happy to be here.
Okay, and with that, I would like to turn it over to the Earth Charter Indiana team for their introductions. Kathy, can I pass it off to you to introduce your team?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm Kathy Sipple. I am the Senior Resiliency Coordinator with Northwest Indiana. I live in Valparaiso. And I also have with me on our team, Renee. Renee, do you want to say a quick hello?
Quick hello. Hi, Renee Tanky, Earth Charter Indiana Resilience Coordinator, working with my fearless leader, Kathy Sipple. And
Renee is in Crown Point, just so you know kind of where we are, boots on the ground.
Oh, I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so that's us. We've been providing community outreach support mainly through this round of the climate action planning program, and we'll talk about that further down on the agenda. So I think back to you, Jennifer.
Great, thank you. And I'll go ahead and just announce it again for the people who've kind of trickled in. Please do go ahead and introduce yourself, your name, and your affiliation in the chat so that we can all see who's here. We do have a packed agenda today, and I do want to note that we have had some slight deviations from the agenda that I sent out earlier this week. We had some opportunities that came up to have some presenters here with us with some timely information. So we did want to accommodate those. But we'll go ahead and get right into it. The first item on our agenda is kind of a surprise for you because it wasn't on the agenda as it was sent, but I'm excited about it. We are fortunate to have Matt Flaherty. How do you pronounce that, Matt? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Flaherty.
Flaherty. Okay, Matt Flaherty, who is going to talk to us a little bit about opportunities with ERI's 2023 McKinney Midwest Climate Project programs. And Matt, I don't know if you have slides or are you just talking? Should we make you a co-host or?
No, I do not have slides. I'm just going to share an overview of some developments in that project and some timelines and that sort of thing and focus for next year, just so folks are aware. And happy to answer questions. So I'll keep it pretty brief.
Okay, take it away then.
I'm Matt Flaherty. I'm with the IU Environmental Resilience Institute. We're been around about 5 years down the Bloomington campus, mostly. It was part of a Prepared for Environmental Change Grand Challenge that former President McRobbie initiated. And we've built a lot of support programs and resources tools for local governments, especially over the last 5 years. And that includes a program called the Resilience Cohort, which works with local governments or other government entities to assess, plan, and prepare for climate change. So that means looking at greenhouse gas emissions inventories, working to reduce emissions, and producing plans to do so, and then taking steps to implement those plans. Another aspect of climate planning is more so on the adapting to impacts that we're already feeling and that will be with us for decades to come. And that same framework of sort of assess, plan, implement applies equally well on that side of climate planning. So what's traditionally called a climate risk and vulnerability assessment is the kind of assessment piece. You're looking at what hazards you're facing, what's the exposure, what infrastructure, what people might be vulnerable to those hazards. Then you're developing strategies and actions to build resilience and adapt to those impacts. And then again, working to implement those strategies that are developed in a plan. So you can kind of think of climate planning as two sides. Both involve an assessment, planning, and implementation stage. Most of the past work with that resilience cohort program has been focused on assessing greenhouse gas emissions and developing reduction strategies. So next year with the resilience cohort program, we're going to be really emphasizing the resilience side of things. We'll be working with a technical partner, subject matter expert with more programmatic expertise in that area of planning to, again, conduct vulnerability assessments with local governments and produce either climate resilience plans that could be standalone plans. They could be an update to an existing plan to incorporate more adaptation and resilience actions. It could even be an update to something like a hazard mitigation plan at the county level, which already is addressing environmental hazards, but you can update those to incorporate climate projections and climate change specific hazards. So there's a variety of ways that one could plug into next year's resilience cohort program. The application for that hasn't launched just yet. That'll be coming by October 3rd, so a few weeks from now. But there's a second program that I wanted to mention, which is called the Mckinney Climate Fellows Program. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because there's a sort of longer evolution of both of those programs that I think folks, some of our partners sometimes are confused about which is which. And they've been united in a single project, which is what Jen mentioned. So the McKinney Midwest Climate Project, named after McKinney Family Foundation, who has generously funded support of these two programs. So again, the resilience cohort you can think of as local government participants in a cohort or group process to work on climate planning. The McKinney Climate Fellows Program, on the other hand, pairs students, undergraduate and graduate students from Indiana University, all campuses, with host organizations in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to advance climate or sustainability plans, climate or sustainability projects. So that's kind of a broader base where we've got folks working in land trusts for, Cummins, for instance, down in Columbus, Indiana, various MPOs around the state, doing all sorts of things, working on, electric vehicle transition or working on, green programs for a company, for instance. Where the programs overlap is that those climate fellows, those students who go for a summer fellowship with the host organization, we've allowed many of those fellows to support the local governments participating in the resilience cohort, because we find that a lot of times that added capacity is really needed to advance local government climate planning. So you can really think of those two programs under the Midwest Climate Project umbrella as a Venn diagram, if you will. They are distinct programs, but they overlap and mutually support one another. So I wanted to clarify some of that in case there was any confusion from folks who've worked with us in the past. I see something in the chat about the Sugar Hines Land Trust, right? Who's been a partner of the McKinney Climate Fellows program, hosting those fellows. Of course, NIRPC has also hosted climate fellows in support of the resilience cohort's work. So those are the two programs that were in the process of launching next year's applications. I already mentioned what the focus of the resilience cohort is going to be next year. I'm happy to answer questions about that. I mentioned that the application will launch by October 3rd, and we'll have a website update coming in the next week or so as well to share more programmatic details about what that program is going to look like, how folks might fit into that based on their previous climate planning work, if any, though it could be an entry point for new folks as well. And then the McKinney Climate Fellows program host organization application is already open. I'll go ahead and drop a link to that in the chat just so you can have it. And my colleague Danny Schaust is the manager of that program. And let me see if I can pull a link up to the Climate Fellows program as well on the ERI website, just for your reference. So if you're certainly if you're a private organization or a nonprofit and you want to host a fellow for some sort of sustainability or climate project, that's the avenue for you. That's the application. If you're a public sector entity or local government that wants to participate in the resilience cohort, that group working together on climate planning, then you only need to fill out that resilience cohort application. And there'll be an opportunity to check a box that you would like a fellow as part of that. The last category I'll talk about is public sector folks who might want to host a fellow for a different project unrelated to the resilience cohort. If you're, say, a local government that has a parks initiative around it, surrounding electrifying equipment, for instance, and you want somebody to help work on messaging around that and doing research, and you wanted to host a fellow to get that extra capacity over the summer from a focused sustainability student, you could apply to be a host organization as well, even if you're a local government or in the public sector. So I know that's a little confusing because these programs overlap, even though they are distinct. I hope that did an okay job explaining what they are. And we'll have some website updates to hopefully better communicate that a little bit with some of our partners soon. But I'm happy to answer questions, I guess, from anyone who has them about how the programs work, how you might fit in, or about next year's focus for the resilience cohort.
Can I kick it off, Matt?
Sure.
I was sort of the one who intervened and roped you into this meeting because one of the things that we want to do in this meeting is try to set up the handoff of what we've been doing at the regional level, developing that framework. As you know, we are the first region to develop a climate action plan in Indiana. So we've kind of challenged the existing mold, right, with what you had before. So just trying to make it a little bit more clear for communities what's going to happen at the end of this regional, framework development. Do you have a sense for, I guess both communities that have been part of our cohort within your larger cohort, which of those options might make the most sense? And then if you're somebody like Crown Point, for instance, they have not been part of this. They're a county seat in Lake County, which, we'd really like to get Crown Point on board. So can you just kind of give some specifics of how those different types of participants or not participants might choose wisely from what you've just laid out? Thanks.
Yeah. So the two basic avenues for anybody is in the local government space, I guess, is to either participate in a given year's resilience cohort programming, or and they could host a fellow as part of that. So participate in the resilience cohort, host a fellow as part of that if you would like. Or the other option is simply to host a fellow not as part of the cohort. So for your own project. And for folks that have been engaged or maybe are newly engaging with the regional guidance that NERPC and ECI are developing with with support of this group, it depends on what they want to take on, really. I mean, if there are, my understanding is that the plan is moving towards a variety of high impact actions, right? That folks could implement potentially in their jurisdiction, cities, towns, counties. If they are wanting to build a sub-plan or their own plan based on the framework that NERPC has developed, and they want to work on that planning process, and they need support in doing that, they could host a fellow to work on that. It wouldn't probably be part of the resilience cohort because that's not the focus of next year's cohort. Isn't greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategies. That was this year's cohort, and we don't do everything all at once. We kind of focus in each given year on a particular area of climate planning. I will say the ERI team, myself and Anna Gagore, who works with me on the local government side, we're available to any local government in Indiana at any time to provide the assistance we can. So we're always happy to provide ad hoc guidance on any aspect of climate sustainability work to the extent we can. Of course, it's not as in-depth as something like the cohort program, but we're always there to advise about how, for instance, a city like Crown Point or a county could take what's been developed by NERPC and integrate it in some way into their own planning and policy direction as a city or county. So that could include things like updating a comprehensive plan to include a sustainability or climate chapter, or integrating climate-oriented goals into the existing chapters of their comprehensive plan. Because there will be transportation-oriented goals, there will be land use-oriented goals and strategies, right? There are other ways that could be done. So there's a lot of flexibility depending on what the goals of the local government are. I think a good first step, honestly, would just be to contact us and set up a meeting to talk about what their goals are and what options are. Speaking more specifically about the resilience cohort for next year, again, we'll have more details forthcoming on our website soon, but that is focused on vulnerability assessments and resilience planning actions. Any local government could take that on as an entry point to climate planning. In some ways, it would it would support or complement really well the greenhouse gas reduction strategies that NERC has been working on. So those could mutually support one another, and it would be a way for local government to take a next step if they are interested. Counties, especially, are typically where the hazard mitigation plans are housed. So if a county government wanted to get involved, maybe it's a way for them to participate in next year's resilience cohort and work on integrating climate resilience strategies into their hazard mitigation plan. So that comes to mind for county governments. So in sum, Kathy, there's not one way or one path. Climate planning it touches most things that cities do. So there's a lot of different ways to get engaged with it, depending on, again, the needs and values and priorities of the local government. So sorry that it's not a simple answer, but we're happy to set up a call or a meeting with anybody who would like to talk about those options and talk about what could be a good fit in either of these programs, or just in general with general guidance from ERI.
Thank you. I'll see if others have questions for you. I appreciate it.
We do still have some time for questions, so don't hold back. If you have questions for Matt, put them in the chat, or go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask.
And when we have those more details on the resilience cohort up on the website and the application live, we'll of course circulate that with our any previous participants and contacts at NERC, ECI, and other governments in the Northwest Indiana. So I'm sure they'll be able to circulate that with this group as well.
Are the costs similar to past years?
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
I should have mentioned that. Yeah, if you're working with a consultant to develop some of these things, it might cost $100,000 to $500,000 depending on the scope of work and what you're developing. We try to deliver at a very affordable and low barrier rate for communities. So typically in the $1,500 range is probably roughly what we're looking at for participation in the resilience cohort next year. The regional model with NERC was a little bit different because it's kind of a different approach and needed some custom support. But our cost this year for the resilience cohort climate planning is $1,500. It'll probably be similar next year. We're still finalizing that. And then typically we ask local governments to pay just a portion of the scholarship cost for the fellows. That's how the fellows are compensated, is through a scholarship direct into their bursar account. And for graduate students, that's $6,000. For undergrad, it's $4,800. And we typically ask for public sector and nonprofit folks to contribute a minimum of $2,000 towards that. So again, a steeply discounted rate to lower the barrier for organizations that are maybe more resource constrained.
And Matt, you have had some individual communities participating directly in the first year of the cohort. I think you had Gary and Michigan City. And then last year you had, was it Maryville and
Maryville and LaPorte? Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Working on their own individual plans.
And not everybody who applies gets one. It's kind of a little bit divvied up all around the state too. Yes,
the resilience cohort, typically we've been able to accept everybody who wants to participate. The demand to host a climate fellow has been outstripping what we're able to support a little bit. So yeah, it is an application process on hosting a climate fellow. It's at least somewhat competitive, I guess.
Thank you. And I know some people have just joined, so could you repeat the deadline for that? And we'll be sure to share the links again in the notes.
Yeah. So while we've already launched the application for the fellows, if you want to be a host organization for that outside the context of the resilience cohort, that's already live. The resilience cohort application will be going live by October 3rd. They share a common end date or deadline, which is, I believe, also November 3rd. It's a Friday, end of the November 4th. So really beginning of November is the deadline to keep in mind for either of those programs. My colleagues and I at ERI are more than happy to have a one-on-one meeting or multiple one-on-one meetings with anybody who's interested in the programs to talk about how it might support the work you're interested in, how you'd fit in best based on your goals and needs.
Great. Any other questions for Matt? Okay, well, I want to thank you so much, Matt. I'm glad that we were able to get you in here today to
Yeah.
share that really timely and great information. If it's okay with you, I'll probably include your contact. Oh, there it is. I'll probably include your contact information in our meeting notes when we send those out after this meeting. But yeah, definitely would love to see our partners here take advantage of those programs.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you all. Great to be here. And yeah, my contact info is in the chat there. Feel free to reach out anytime on those programs or other climate related needs.
Okay, great.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks again, Matt.
Yeah,
I did want to reiterate, because I think we've had some people join us since we did introductions. We are asking that everyone, if you have not already, please introduce yourself, your name and your organization or affiliation in the chat so we can get a sense of who's here. And with that, let's go ahead and keep moving forward on our packed agenda. Next up, we do have, let me pull my agenda back up. We are going to have some updates from Nipsco on energy efficiency initiatives. I don't want to butcher a name here again, but Byron, is it Zitcherl?
Hey guys, yes, it's Byron Zickrell.
Okay, I was pretty, not bad, right?
Yeah, not bad, you tried.
Yep. So thank you so much, Byron, for being here. Byron is with Nipsco. He's the program manager for environmental policy and sustainability. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, and joined by me, we have Robbie Sears, which is managing the demand side management program, and Jennifer Stashawa is also here as well.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for being here. I know that some of the takeaways I've had from some of our discussions in our previous meetings have kind of centered around Nipsco's plans and different energy conservation programs. So I think this one is also very timely. And with that, I'll go ahead and let you and your team take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Robbie's got some slides that he wants to present today. So
yeah.
Okay.
And Jen, is it all right if I just try to share my screen? I'm not a typical Zooms user. I'm a Teams user, so I'll give it a
Okay.
shot. If that's okay.
Yeah, I think so. If I believe that Floor is still on and listening with us, she should be able to allow you that permission. I'll see if I can on my end.
What was the name?
You can try going for it. I just want to make sure that we have that.
Who is it again?
Robin Sears.
Robbie Sears?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Let's see here.
Thanks, Floor.
All right. Can you all see that?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, we'll run through and probably a little slide heavy, but we can run through this and I'll hit some highlights. And then if we need to get into details, we can do more of that. So thanks today for letting us join. First off, excuse the disclaimer at the bottom that should have been taken off the slide. There is nothing we'll be sharing today that is confidential, so don't worry about that. My name is Robbie Sears. I'm Director of Regulatory Policy for Nipsco, as well as our energy efficiency programs. And I've worked with energy efficiency for about 30 years through different utilities and have been with Nipsco for a few years now and had the benefit of working with that. But let's go ahead and highlight. One of the things we'll do today is really focus on our electric programs. We do have gas and electric energy efficiency programs. And we're going to kind of start out with some of the numbers right out of the gate. So this gives you a little bit of flavor of where we've had. I call this kind of the new generation of energy efficiency, started back in 2010. The utilities were involved in energy efficiency programs throughout a lot of the 90s. At the end of the 90s, when deregulation started to happen throughout some of the country, energy efficiency was like, where does that fit? Does it fit in a regulated, unregulated market? And so a lot of the programs seem to fade away for a few years. But really, since about 2009, Indiana has been fairly progressive in moving forward with energy efficiency, and all the utilities have that. Just kind of putting things in perspective, so far we've, since 2010, between our residential and commercial industrial, we've saved about 1.4 million megawatt hours. Putting that into somewhat of a perspective, that would power roughly 170,000 homes for a year. Put it into a little bit different perspective. It's savings around about 1% of our customers' usage per year. Now that does compound, as you save, many of the measures have a long life, so you continue to build that up. I will say earlier in my career, energy efficiency programs were trying to slow the growth of customer consumption within the utility. The last 10 years or so of my career, what you have seen is actual utility, not only the usage per customer declining year after year, and a lot of that has to do with both utility energy efficiency as well as energy efficiency standards, but also what you started to see is actual utility load growth starting to slow down. And a lot of that has to do with energy efficiency, particularly if you're not in a community that has huge residential and commercial growth going on, like a Houston area or something like that, one of the major metropolitans that's growing. What you're starting to see is energy efficiency is outpacing the growth that's coming along. So just a little bit on our programs on the electric side, on residential. We have several different programs, try to make sure that we cover most of the different customer groups that we have and markets that we have. We have the traditional rebate programs that are out there for high efficiency air conditioners, pool pumps, heat pumps that promote helping the customer step up to a more efficient piece of equipment. If you've been out to a Sam's or a Costco or Walmart over the last few years, you've probably been able to see sometimes there are LED bulb packs that are very economical. And so we work with those manufacturers to buy down the price of those high efficiency lighting bulb packs to help customers to have that as a much less expensive alternative to move forward. What I will say is lighting is a great example that now the federal standards have gotten to a point where LEDs are basically the standard light bulb out there. So utility programs are starting to move away from that because there's really not that next technology yet that has a substantial savings over LED lighting. We do have home energy assessment / audit programs where we go in and look through people's homes, work through, give them ideas of how they can save, as well as directly install some energy efficiency measures. Appliance recycling, older refrigerators, freezers, and some of the other like window air conditioners. We will go out and pick those up for customers, and we will pay them an incentive to let us come pick those up. Those then are recycled in a environmentally friendly way, so that basically what we're doing is we're taking those old refrigerators and freezers out of the marketplace. If you look back at some of the old refrigerators versus new refrigerators, they are multiple times less efficient. So they use a lot more energy than newer technology. So part of what these programs do is help to get some of that old stuff out, what I call sometimes the beer fridge in the garage or the beer fridge in the basement. People tend to hang on to these, stick them somewhere, and the worst place you can stick them usually is out in the garage, where then in the summertime they're exposed to the heat and they run that much more. So that's a program that we have to help out there. We have school education programs where not only do we work with schools, but we have certain grades with schools that we do educational programs, then provide energy efficient measures for the students to go home and work with their families to install in their home to help drive savings within the home. Multifamily programs, we work with multifamily apartment complexes to where we will go in and actually directly install a set of energy efficiency measures for them. Then we have some online home energy reports. We work in the new construction, trying to promote higher efficiency construction throughout residential markets. And again, the Home Life Calculator is another online tool that helps people just get a better understanding of what their energy usage is. And then we have income qualified, so income-based programs where we'll go in and do an extensive set of energy efficiency upgrades to qualifying customers. And then last but not least, over the last few years, we, like many other utilities, have started to introduce online marketplaces to where we have an online marketplace that you can go on to Nipsco's website, connect, and you can purchase energy efficiency measures at a lower cost. We have those where we're basically helping to buy those down. On the C&I side, not as robust of a program set, but still a lot of savings and kind of big buckets. There's the prescriptive programs, so rebates for changing out lighting, putting in a higher piece of more efficient air conditioning or heat pumps or some technology like that. We've had a lot of success over the last few years in Northwest Indiana as growth has happened in the commercial and industrial new business and new construction area with our new construction programs and helping customers to build buildings that are more efficient and help to fund those and to subsidize those to where it's not as costly for them to take that upgrade. We work with small businesses to where we'll go in and work with trade allies that'll come in and directly install measures inside small businesses to help them to save energy. We currently have some schools programs where we actually work with the schools and their administration to look for ways to measure their efficiency, benchmark them, provide them some guidance of where they can save and how they can garner more energy savings out of their school. And then obviously we have incentives to help them out with that. I missed the custom program. That's really geared at a lot of our what I call manufacturing type customers, as well as larger C&I for the most part. It's really set up that whatever is unique to your business, if there's a way that you can make that more efficient or install more efficient equipment, we have a custom program where we can kind of design the incentive based upon the savings that you have there. And then we also have the business online marketplace as well, where businesses can go in and there's kits and there's different sets of measures that they can purchase at a very reasonable cost that they can install in their business. So that's a real quick overview of the programs that we currently have. Let me kind of jump in and give just a little bit of background, so maybe some understanding of why the utility is in this business and what drives it and what are we doing. I'm going to hit on these at a very high level. Some of the terms that we use in the business is called demand side management. So for years and years, utilities were focused on supply side, building generation to meet customers' future energy needs. Demand side management is nothing more than working with customers to work on the demand side of that energy use, to plan programs and implement programs to help them to save. And what we do is we look for what are cost-effective programs to either save on energy or help to reduce peak capacity so that we reduce the need for new power plants or reduce the level that the power plants are being used, and as well as the build out of some of the transmission and distribution systems that have to do that. It helps us to avoid those costs for customer savings. We have a process, and I'll touch on this in a minute, called an IRP, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But just a lot of the programs are really designed, particularly in Indiana, are really designed around energy efficiency right now more than peak demand type usage. And that's due to some of the ways that the rules and regulations in Indiana are currently set up. So just energy efficiency, obviously there's the direct benefits that customers have on their bills, the program incentives that we help them to purchase down, indirect benefits. There are the environmental benefits that come along with not actually using the energy. We've got the ability, if we can avoid building that next incremental power plant, then there's benefits that come along with that. And just getting into the way that we do this, we have to design these programs from a cost effectiveness standpoint. So there are standard benefit cost tests, economic tests that are built that basically help us to justify and say, this is a better program than just going out and building another power plant or expanding existing resources. Why do we do this? I mean, really, I think over the last probably 10 plus years, you've seen the utility industry really get focused on what's the least cost way to meet our future energy needs of our customers. And particularly as you start to see the transition away from coal, and obviously Nipsco is very aggressive in that transition away from our coal plants to renewables. We're in the middle of that transition now, but a big part of that is what can we do from an energy efficiency standpoint to not have to build even new renewables. If we can help customers to save, it's probably the least cost alternative that we've got many times than building any sort of a new level of generation. I do want to be just honest and clear. From a standpoint of a utility, the way that the regulation is set up, customers do pay for all the energy efficiency programs. So I don't want to mislead anyone. It's just like if we were building a power plant. So those programs are set up. We are compensated for those and customers do pay for those. But that's why those economic tests are there. And that's why there's other things that we have to show that the programs are a more cost-effective way of meeting future energy requirements than just building new power plants. Just a little bit of history in Indiana. As I said, since 2009, things kind of really picked back up in the energy efficiency marketplace. The Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission back in 2009 created some goals. I'll say they were soft goals. That 2% savings was over 10 years. And as I mentioned earlier, most utilities are running programs. They're saving close to about 1% energy use per year. What I would say the gold standard in the country of programs is probably saving 2% of energy use per year. And some areas have very aggressive programs and they're allowed to do that. There's been some regulations over the years that have changed some of the different things. At one point in time, the state had moved forward with having a statewide program that was administered by a third party. Part of the programs were offered by utilities. Part of the programs were offered through the third party that was contracting with the utilities. 2014, the General Assembly passed some legislation where they moved back to let the utilities do that. But also as part of that law, the large industrial customers basically wanted the opportunity to not necessarily pay for the energy efficiency programs and the savings that others, having to help pay for energy efficiency savings of others. They really wanted to be able to go out, pay for their own energy savings, guide their own energy efficiency measures. And so the legislature passed a law that larger commercial industrial customers that are over a megawatt have the ability to go out and operate their own programs. Then in 15 and 17, there was some continued movement in that. There was some regulations that required the utilities every 3 years to produce new plans on how they were going to meet their future. And as part of those plans, they're called an integrated resource plan. As part of those, energy efficiency program planning for the next 3 years was a big part. So as part of that integrated resource plan, what it does is it looks at all the different options the utility has to meet its future energy needs and helps define which ones are the most economical on that. One of the things leading up to that is the utilities typically will contract with a third party to do what's called a market potential study. So they look at our markets, they look at what's happening with federal guidelines, state codes and standards, and say, here's the level of energy savings that you could likely produce, and here's what it would cost, and here's a level that's reasonable. That goes into the IRP to compete with renewables and other types of generation sources to say which one's the most efficient. And then I just mentioned there, again, the savings that we've had to date. I won't go into this too far. This is about the industrial opt-out. This is where the legislature let really the largest customers of the utilities basically run their own programs and fund their own energy efficiency programs. To date, about half of the customers that qualify have opted out of the utility energy efficiency programs and have elected to do their own. We could all sit down and argue of how aggressive each one is in doing their own programs or not, but all the energy efficiency programs for the utility were voluntary as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they were participating in the utility program either. But this is something that is, I won't say totally unique to Indiana, but it is one of the things that our very largest customers don't necessarily have to participate in utility energy efficiency. Just kind of building, we do have a very robust set of regulatory process that we go through. Like I said, every 3 years, we produce a new set of energy efficiency plans. There are several factors that we have to go through to show the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission that our plans are cost effective and are in the best interest of customers. Every year, we go through external third-party evaluation that basically says, did you really achieve the savings that you said you achieved or you don't? or you didn't. And so all those programs are evaluated. That is submitted to the commission, and then they go back and look at from a backwards point based on what you saved. Are those programs still producing cost-effective savings for customers? Annually, we do go through filings to basically fund the next year's worth of programs and report out where we are. And then we have quarterly scorecards that we provide to the IURC. And then we'll just talk a little bit about how programs are governed in Indiana. Each one of the utilities in Indiana, including Nipsco, has an oversight board. Our oversight board is basically made up of Nipsco, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, which is a state paid kind of consumer advisory. They get involved in any kind of utility rate case, any kind of utility action. They are the state agency that looks out for the customer. And then there's the Citizens Action Coalition, which is a consumer activist group that's very active in the state that we work with as well. So between Nipsco, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, the Citizens Action Coalition, they're involved in all of our energy efficiency filings. They're on our oversight board. All three members have an equal vote in what we do in the programs that we run. So it's not like the programs are ran totally by the utility and these others just get a chance to maybe advise. They get to vote and say, do we move forward? Do we not move forward? Here's the programs that we want the utility to do. And they work with us on that. We meet with those oversight boards on a monthly basis. We go through where the programs are, where we're designing new programs, what's our evaluation results. So again, just a very robust process that goes into not only setting what the targets are for the utility, energy efficiency savings, saying here's the programs that ought to be there and they're cost effective, but also the evaluation and the management of those programs. So I hopefully went through that fairly quickly. It may have been a little bit longer than what you were looking for, but I wanted to at least give you a little bit of background on the basis of our programs and how those operate, and then would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And I may need some help now on how to take down the presentation.
Yes, that was fantastic, Robbie. Thank you so much. Let's see. I think I can take it down.
That's perfect.
I think I just cut you right off there.
All right.
Thank you so much. We do still have some time for questions as well, and I did see some activity in the chat. So I'll go ahead and take a look in the chat and see if there are any questions that I believe some of them were addressed also in the chat. Let's see here. We had some questions about whether or not customers know about some of these programs, and that what Jennifer did respond to that, the way that you kind of do outreach for some of these programs. So I think that's been answered. Speak now if not. Some questions about local installers, and I believe some follow-up there also from Jennifer answering those questions.
Yeah, we traditionally call those kind of our trade ally groups. So if there's a sector, say like the heating and air conditioning sector or the plumbing sector, we work very closely with those groups, not only the heating and air conditioning installers, but also the distributors and the manufacturers to try to work to help move the equipment more and more efficient in our area.
Great. And I do see in the chat, Dr. Argelon with IUN has asked if she could have this slide for later for discussions at IU Northwest. And I would also say, if it's okay with you, would it be allowable for us to share out your slides when we share out the meeting notes?
Yes, let me do this, if it's all right, Jen. Let me take that disclaimer off of the front so that somebody doesn't think that they're violating some kind of confidentiality, and then I'll send you a clean copy of that you could distribute out to the group, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, a couple other questions in the chat here. I do see Billy Warren is asking, what plans do you have to clean up the coal ash? If you want to touch on that briefly, but I think that might get into a pretty big discussion for today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I will admit that is not a program that I'm directly involved in. I'm not sure if Byron can speak to that or not. We do work with IDEM on all of the different facilities we have to make sure that our plans are approved by the Indiana Department of Environmental Management.
Okay, trying to just keep looking at the chat here. We do have Renee said she requested a home energy assessment about a month ago and didn't get a response. So perhaps we can follow up with her after that as well and connect you to her contact information.
We definitely will, yes.
Aaron Argelon is asking, can you speak to any movement on creating more local hubs for green energy production? I heard that there are some state rules against it.
Right now, when we talk about green energy hubs, there really isn't a regulatory paradigm for what some would call like community solar or solar farms or shared solar farms within the state. I do believe that the legislature through the 21st Century Task Force has looked at what's the potential of opening up for community solar. I will say in our most recent integrated resource plan, we did allocate a certain amount of future resources that we would procure from what's called distributed energy resources. We're working on that now, so that could be distributed solar, storage, those types of things. Don't have all of that defined as far as exactly what those programs will look like, but that is part of our portfolio to move forward, to work and to actually seek out other forms of distributed energy. Predominantly, I would say focused on renewables and storage.
And I do see Kathy's hand up, Kathy Luther.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but I don't know if we can, I'm sure we can't answer them all today. Maybe we should set up a separate meeting, but as we look at practices to recommend to municipalities for climate action, a lot of them could center around energy efficiency, incentives for businesses or homeowners, and you guys have a ton of years of experience with it. Do you have a lot of like analysis about what works and what doesn't, what obstacles there are to people doing this? Because I don't want to recommend a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, and you guys know it doesn't work because you've been trying it for 20 years. Or are there better ways that a city or town might actually help boost your success? That's one of my questions.
I do think there are opportunities there, not only for partnership, but then there's also opportunities for communities to do certain forms of tax financing and things within their area if they really want to promote energy efficiency. And probably the best way to get into that discussion, because it could get kind of lengthy and detailed, is probably to set up a separate discussion and really talk about how not only Nipsco, but the communities themselves, if they wanted to pursue things, what are some of the opportunities they've got at their disposal.
Okay, my other question is about, I don't know how many of you guys, some of you have been on our other calls, but the industrial, for our greenhouse gas emissions, the industries are probably 80 to 90% of our region's greenhouse gas emissions. And so, and I'm sure a lot of them are that over 1 million users. And so if half of them have opted out of your programs, and I know, pretty sure you can't tell us which ones, but have you done analysis of that? Like, I know I used to be on the Valpo water utility, and we could tell when the university put in water efficiency because that was a big user, and we could tell. So I don't know if you guys have data like that.
Some of the information that I showed earlier is you can kind of see on the commercial industrial savings that there was a drop in the amount of savings of the utility programs. So the part that I can say is we saw, as those large customers had the ability to self-direct and fund their own energy efficiency, we saw our programs drop. Now, what I'm not probably able to, well, we just don't have the data to know exactly how much they truly went out and did on their own, to see that. I will say that, it's a balance. We do see a fair amount of continued efficiency measures. I mean, we have had probably our largest Yeah, I believe it is our largest industrial customer, has recently joined our green power program,
Okay.
where all the electricity that they're buying, they have also entered into where that's also buying the renewable energy credits associated with that. And so it's helping to fund, continued growth of renewables. So we're seeing a really big trend. And what you're traditionally seeing the last few years is the ESG goals of corporations are driving a lot more interest in energy efficiency. One of the things I failed to mention, and something that we just started this year, is we started to target those customers that have opted out, and we're going back into their facilities, identifying, doing free industrial audits for a number of those, giving them here's lists of opportunities, and then presenting to them the opportunity to rejoin the utility sponsor programs. And here are incentives that we can, assist you with those. It's in its infancy, is what I would say. We're just now starting to produce some of those reports. So there's a chance that, again, that as the energy ESG goals become more and more prevalent at these larger industrials, they, what I would say is one of two things. They could rejoin utility funded programs, or I think you're going to definitely see them be investing a lot more of even their own money to fund not only energy efficiency, but carbon reduction activities. So.
Great. And, this has been a lot of great discussion. I'm glad to see a lot of question and answer going on. In the interest of time, I think we do want to get towards moving along on our agenda. So I will just say, if there are questions that remain for Robbie and his team, go ahead and continue to drop those in the chat, and we can always follow up and make sure that we get the right contact information or kind of clarify some of those answers and send out that information with the notes.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Robbie, and the rest from Nipsco. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and dive back into the rest of our agenda. Next up, I'm going to pass it off to Kathy Sipple, who I believe has some other contacts lined up as well, to give an update on some of the community-led climate initiatives that are underway.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I would love to invite the folks from Nipsco to stick around too. We're going to be doing breakout sessions, so we very much would love to hear your voices when we get in these smaller groups, and that might allow people to go deeper on some of the questions that they ask. So if you can stay with us, that would be fantastic. But yes, I would like to give an update, and I'm really happy to have Connie here with us. I think in our second meeting, she was elected the leader of our citizen, circle. And part of, a really huge initiative that she helped pull off was hosting an event on August 27th in Highland called Region Neighbors for Sustainability, because we felt that helping citizen-led initiatives like forming sustainability commissions, or barring that, at least interested neighbors who could band together, would be a big help toward this whole climate action plan. So Connie, let me let you give a recap on that. And if there's anybody else from that meeting, I've seen some familiar faces here, you could ask them to speak too. Thanks, Connie.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, hi, I'm Connie Wichala. We had an event, as Kathy mentioned, Saturday, August 27th. Highland Neighbors for Sustainability hosted what we called Region Neighbors for Sustainability. It was on the grounds of the Promise You Art House in Highland. We had around, I'd say, between 30 and 35 people who came from about 10 different communities in Northwest Indiana. Included in those were some young families who brought their children, and that was really nice to see. So some people were from communities who were just starting to form sustainability groups. Some had groups, such as Highland, and some who wanted to start a group. We invited two speakers One was Alex Bazan, who works in the Office of Sustainability in South Bend, and Andy Johns Davis, who is on this call. Hi, Andy, from the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. She brought her knowledge and energy in a great talk. The rest of the program was devoted to participant engagement. And so Alex conducted an exercise where we asked people to tell us what their challenges were in the communities that they were from. And then we asked second, what accomplishments they wanted us to know. You know, everybody wrote on different colored sticky notes. And then the third thing was we asked them what they wanted to accomplish but hadn't yet. And Kathy took that information and is processing and analyzing all of that. The goal of this event was to get people from different communities in Northwest Indiana to talk to each other, to work together and learn from each other about what we could do in the areas of sustainability. And we had an outpouring of enthusiasm from people who attended. People said they feel motivated. Some people said they feel very hopeful. We're staying in touch with them. The goal is to have another meeting in November where we'll do a check-in and see how things are going with all these different groups. And I have to say, it was a very inspiring event. We have some people, as Kathy mentioned, who are on this call who were there. And if any of you want to speak up, please do.
Don't want to put people on the spot, but in case anybody's shy or wants to join in that conversation, it was not recorded, being an in-person event, but we did start a Slack channel. So I went ahead and put that information in chat. And Slack, we just chose that kind of so it would not be on social media, and email can get kind of interruptive with reply alls. So we've got Slack channels, sub-channels within the main channel that are geographically specific. You know, again, we had people from, as Connie said, 10 different communities. There was Hammond, I think East Chicago, Highland, Munster, Valpo, Porter, Cherville, lots and lots of people showed up, and it was great. There was a lot of interest around native plants. So we've got a channel specific to that. There were people interested in tree planting. So whatever people are interested in, I just want to kind of be I dubbed myself that day the climate concierge, to sort of connect people to others in their communities and get you working in hubs and find out what's needed. So we're still addressing that.
One thing I would like to say is that the end goal, basically, it was to get people thinking about going to their councils, their town or city councils, and asking them to create a sustainability commission, so that a sustainability commission can actually have residents from each community helping their elected officials and working on the climate action plan. That will be the framework that will be coming out of NERC from these meetings.
Thanks, Connie. And then just last thing I'll say is kind of a way of further introduction and something we can do now before we get all these commissions set up, is you can join me on the Northwest Indiana team that we have created for the International Climate Action Challenge. It started on August 31st and it ends at the end of November. So if you want to plant trees, if you want to organize, cleanup in your community or do some kind of recycling initiative, work on native plants, really you can run any project within that. Even if it's something you're already doing, it would be fun for you to join the team and just share what you're doing so that we can start to celebrate it and kind of map what's going on in the region. So I put my email in the chat and I put that direct link to join the team in chat. So either way, whatever way people might want to reach out to me, I'd love to connect with you and loop you in. So Victoria posted a question, would we be able to share the information about the November meeting? Let's see, which November meeting?
our follow-up meeting.
Oh,
that we'll
yes.
schedule.
Thank you. Yes, and in fact, I am reaching out to individual, people who showed up at that meeting and having like geographically specific meetings before we even get to November. So yes, we'll definitely let you know about that one. And, if anybody's interested who wasn't there and wants to be looped in on the sooner meetings, absolutely. Thanks, Victoria. I think that's it, Jennifer. Why don't we go back to you?
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing all the hard work that's been going on and all the progress being made. And I think, this really came together nicely with the 3 sort of presentations, updates that we've had to kind of move us on to our next topic on the agenda. And that is to, let me pull that back up here. We want to have a little bit of a discussion updating this group, the Climate Action Northwest Indiana, this work group's goals and objectives. We have had some conversation in the past about our overall goal and purpose of this group and why we're meeting. So I do have just one slide that I would like to share just to set the stage for us. And then I believe that Kathy Sipple is going to be leading us through and kind of facilitating some breakout discussions around this topic. So bear with me as I find my one slide in all my open tabs. Okay, can everyone see my screen there? Go ahead and start it. So just to give a little bit of background about kind of where we are and where we've come from. When this group first started to convene in May, and of course there was history before that with this group kind of working together on developing a regional emissions inventory based on the year 2017. But when we started to come together as this group in May and then our follow-up meetings in June, we did work together and kind of consented as a group the goal of this work group, and that is to develop a regional framework for climate action with science-based carbon reduction targets around which Northwest Indiana communities can build their climate action plans. So to those of you who may be joining us for the first time or weren't here for that process, that's kind of what we came to is that's the purpose of this group and what we're working toward. Now, obviously, since we have made a lot of progress, we're not completely there yet with having the framework finalized, but we are moving in that direction. And so I wanted to kind of shift the conversation to, once that framework is completed, at that point, what is the goal of this work group? What are we meeting for? What are we working toward? This conversation was kind of brought up as our climate fellow is working on that climate framework. One of the items that he brought up was kind of objectives and goals and that process. And we really came to the conclusion of, given that this is a framework and the communities will then be hopefully going through their own climate action plan process that might have some teeth or some mechanisms, it's not really appropriate for us to go through a long process of, coming up with objectives, based on specific items at this point. But we would propose that, one thing we've already discussed is that one of the goals that we're working for and kind of developing this framework around is a regional carbon emission reduction of 50% from the 2017 levels of that inventory by 2030. And then, of course, carbon neutral by 2050. So just wanted to chat a little bit about how do we get there as this group, as our next steps after the framework is finalized. We wanted to propose a few things that seem to make sense based on what we've talked about so far. These don't get into, a huge level of detail, but just a couple of ideas. One would be the number of communities or percentage of communities adopting climate action plans by whatever year that might be. Is that 2030? Does that need to be sooner in order to meet that 2030 goal? We've also talked a lot about communities forming sustainability commissions to advance climate action by whatever year that might be. And there may be others. So we just kind of wanted to set the stage for this discussion to talk about kind of those general outputs that we're looking to achieve. So we wanted to get your input on what outputs are attainable in what time frame to kind of help us advance that larger goal of a regional carbon emissions reduction of 50% by 2030. I'll pause there and let anyone else from kind of the working team chime in about kind of what we have there. And Then after that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Kathy Sipple to kind of facilitate us through a discussion. Any questions? Okay, Kathy, I think you can take it away then and kind of transition us into the discussion.
Okay, thank you. You know, as Jennifer said, we had to kind of get creative on what are we doing as a region. We are the only region in Indiana that's ever done a regional climate action plan that was based on the first regional greenhouse gas inventory. And so, you know, now that it's going to be turned over to the communities, the reason that we chose these two objectives, forming sustainability commissions, is if you can kind of think about in your own community, if you don't have a sustainability commission, do you have a city or town council or a mayor that's already equipped with the knowledge, you know, to make this climate action plan happen? What we really hate to do is put all this work into, you know, the research and then come up with a plan and kick it over to a community that's just not set up to do this adoption. So how do you think it would help a community, number one, to have a sustainability commission? Just kicking that conversation around, I think would actually probably make the best first conversation that we'll go into with our breakout rooms, and then we'll give you the second follow-up question after that. So just in your group, I think we're going to go with Jennifer, Kathy, and Renee. Are you good with us doing 3? Because we do have a pretty big group. That would be eight of us in each group if we do 3. 12 in a group seems like kind of big to hear everyone's voice. So the objective is within these small groups, we're going to give you something called Google Jamboard. And so facilitators, please go to the links that I shared with you. Feel free, once you get in your breakout room, to share that link in chat with your group, with people, and they can write their own little virtual post-it notes right on the Jamboard. Or people in the groups, you can tell your facilitator and they will write that for you if the technology is just not comfortable for you. So we've got a few questions in chat that I want to go to.
Yeah, Kathy, I did want to see if you did want to address those questions.
Yeah, I think so.
A question from Billy Warren: how is the carbon measured, and how do we measure each industry or corporation? Overall, it makes sense to find out where the carbon and who it is coming from. I think that's something we've touched on a little bit. Maybe Kathy Luther would be best to speak to that, that we've touched on a little bit in some of our previous meetings about how we handled industry in the 2017 inventory, and also how it will be handled in the framework. Kathy, you're muted.
Sorry. I mean, we're going to continue to follow the, I believe, pretty much the ICLEI ClearPath protocol, which is, so probably we would go back every 5 years or so. I think NERC could do this as a region and basically update the inventory of emissions, which for the industry sector, they report their emissions for in carbon dioxide equivalents for quite a few activities, their processes, their fugitive emission. There's a lot of stuff. The major ones report on EPA's, and it's an EPA public database called Flight. So we use their reported data for industry emissions. For transportation emissions, we use vehicle miles traveled and fleet mix information that we have as NERC. For most general energy use, both industrial, residential, and commercial, we collected that data directly from Nipsco. And we're able to obtain some data also from Kankakee Valley REMC to supplement that for some places that may not be using Nipsco for their electricity. So basically, I mean, those are the other sources, solid waste information. We're going to just follow that protocol, and ICLEI is also integrating into that. Google has some data sets that they're collecting and will be almost automated. So anyway, so they provide us a lot of resources to update the inventory every few years. I think it's probably not, I don't know how much resources or capacity to do it every year, but I think we could do it maybe every 5 years or so. But so that's kind of how the monitoring it is heavily modeled, not all is based directly on emissions. So
I
to
think-
that,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I was going to say to that extent, the industry data is probably the best because there's a somewhat calculated too sometimes, but did that answer your question?
I think it's a big question, and I would say I would wonder just what you think, Kathy Sipple, just in interest of getting into the discussion. I wonder if, Billy, we can follow up with you maybe after the meeting to get more in the weeds on that question, because I think it's there's a lot more to it than we could probably discuss in the time we have here. But we do have some past presentations, and we could also connect you to the way the modeling's actually being done and the specifics of that.
Oh,
Thank
she said
you.
sure.
Thank you, Billy, for that. Yeah, and there are recordings of some of these meetings as well with fairly detailed presentations. So if we can share those links, I think that'll get you caught up, and then we'd be happy to address further questions.
Yeah.
So that sounds great. And then, yeah, and then Aaron had a question about, can you go ahead and address that one, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question, and I would propose that as we get into the breakout rooms, maybe
I think it's a breakout room question.
Yeah, I do too, and maybe it's something, I think that's a great question that maybe each of you, when you're in your breakout rooms, if you want to consider this question, do the people in the room feel a commission has to come together before the plan? It seems like that makes sense, and they help facilitate the plan and engage community. I think that's a fantastic question. So I would encourage, each of our breakout groups to make that a part of this discussion.
Thank you very much. So I am working on the breakout rooms right now, and let's see here. I think I've got it just about the way we need it to be, all even Steven. Okay, I guess if you're going to drop out, I hope nobody drops out. We'd really love to have you be a part of this conversation, but if you're going to drop out, it might be good to do that now so we don't have it really uneven groups. But let's go ahead, and I'm going to open these rooms. Please do use your facilitator, not use, but participate with your facilitator to make sure your voice is heard. And we're going to give you, let's say 15 minutes, and group leaders, if you still need time, come on back to the main room. I'm going to stay in the main room. Tell me, hey, we're in the middle of something juicy. We need, a few more minutes, or send me a direct message. That would be also fine. But what we're going to do is just hear from you about this topic around sustainability commissions. And it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, as was posed in the question. So that would be a great thing to just get the conversation started. Let's go ahead and open all rooms. We're going to give it 15 minutes, come back and report out on some of our findings, and then we'll do another round with another breakout. Okay, everybody
Kathy,
clear?
which room are we? Which rooms? I have the link to 3 different rooms. I don't know which one I'm supposed to go to.
Yeah. Okay. So Kathy
For
Luther,
facilitators.
you're going to be in room 3, and Jen, you're going to be in room 2. With her little the little thing that we do after
This meeting is being recorded.
the thing that we do after we reconvene is just find out, like, what happened in those other rooms, since that's the idea, is just to have more listening posts and find out what was talked about. So Kathy Luther, you don't have to be the reporter from your room, but would you or someone from your group be willing?
Well, anyone could. I just want to say at the front end, I thought I was in the Jamboard, and I was, but I couldn't edit it because I wasn't in Google.
Oh, okay.
So after spending a few minutes doing that, I realized I could have spent the whole 15 minutes trying to get into Google and get back. So all of our comments are in chat.
Okay.
And I don't know if everyone can see them, or all the people in my group can see them, or if only I can see them.
I think only from your group. So if you could save the chat, do you know how to save chat? You just click the 3 dots in your chat window where it says more, and then do save chat.
Okay. Oh, I see the group 3 chat. Oh, no,
Yep.
that's a Jamboard link. Oh.
You can also, Kathy, sometimes I'll just like highlight the whole thing and copy it at the end of the meeting to make sure it doesn't get lost.
So that's a good idea.
Or if you speak them, then we'll have that on the recording at least. So that's okay, as long as they're represented, and we can type them up later for you.
Okay, and we kind of wandered around. We didn't actually probably answer the actual questions, but So here are my notes that we.
Do you want us to come back to you?
No, I actually wonder if someone else should do this, not me.
Okay.
No, I can do it. So at the end, I think, and Andy was really helpful because she's the only one on a sustainability commission. And she did think because they already have the infrastructure there and they have committees and they're working in different areas, that the question about which the chicken and the egg question was, it probably would be a lot more effective to have some type of sustainability commission in place first, to be, otherwise you're the action will go much faster. Everything will go much faster, I think, in adoption of a plan and implementing it. And then we talked a lot about things that we need for the communities to adopt the plans. We didn't really set any numerical goals or timelines, but just that we need to make sure we have the case model for the why, maybe example plans. And I think the menu idea that we were trying to forward, it will fit along those lines. And that we really include a lot about policies that should be, model policies to adopt. We include a lot about education actions, and that the whole process be very transparent and allow for community action in the because of other red tape from government sector and business sector, that there be a lot of emphasis on things people can do on their own without, or small groups of people can do without requiring a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. So, and I guess to my head, I'm like thinking, oh, adopting an ordinance, that's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. Just using, I think this is what it means. I don't know, does anybody else in the group, did I explain better?
I think the one thing I really was trying to hit on is transparency. A lot of times when I look at who is on a board or a commission, there is someone from BP. So that to me is a conflict of interest. I think it needs to be community led, meaning you're not doing this because you work at BP or the steel mill. And I think that when I was at IUN for policy and procedure, we had some speakers, and for the people who know me, know that I know to make change, you have to make people uncomfortable. So I pointed out to those commissions and named every single one, and don't think the professor was really happy with me, but someone needs to be saying it, that there can't be hidden agendas. So when I say transparency, it's not just an education for community, it's taking people, educating them, and getting people that don't have hidden agendas because they work for BP or they work for Nipsco or they work for this action, whatever. So when I'm talking about transparency, I think it needs to be reflective of what citizen concerns are. And I think the only way to be reflective of what citizen concerns are is to take a qualitative and quantitative survey, and then compile those surveys. And that could be one survey over all the municipalities. And then instead of letting a commission decide what's important, the commission is really just saying these 5 things surfaced in LaPorte County. This happened in Michigan City. This happened in Valparaiso. I think that it has to be community driven. So I just want to be clear what I mean by community driven, meaning a commission isn't making, setting the bar of what environmental justice is. And I honestly, and I'm gonna say it, and it might make me seem awful, but I do specialize in diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability, and I'm certified through Northwestern. We cannot talk about environmental justice and say a tax exemption is an environmental justice, because I can give you 20 reasons why it's not. Land ownership in America is 90% white male, and our largest landowner being the federal government. So if NERC is really wanting to make a change, we also, if we're doing it per municipality, we have to invest in education, transparency into the communities. Because if I want a Nipsco report, a lot of those reports I have to sign for and be in a room, or I can't let it out of my hands. And the people that are involved in policy know that. So I think commissions have to be empowered. And I think I use the word empower, transparency, and I'm going to throw diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I think for different people, that means different things, and tax exemptions aren't environmental justice.
Now,
Lily, can I ask you something?
taken out of context.
You're in Chesterton, is that right? So Chesterton currently does not have a commission. Do you think Chesterton would be better served to have a sustainability commission of some kind? And would you be willing to be part of like developing that? Right now, if there's nothing, we're kind of talking about theory, right?
That's going to dovetail, I think, with our group. I'll leave it
Yeah.
at that for now, but
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
yeah.
I know I'm a very strong voice, so I don't want to overpower this group, especially when I'm just learning more about NERC. So I think I do want to hear what other groups have said, and I don't think I could make a big decision, but I did agree with everybody in my group that these commissions are greatly needed. And
Okay.
yeah,
That's what we're NERC doesn't have the power to like tell cities or anybody to do this. They're just kind of trying to get to this number and looking at what are the ways that we can encourage, like what are the things that make sense. To the extent that we can, you know, recommend these in the climate action plan and support communities to do it. Like that's NERC's role. But if Chesterton wants to do it, it's going to take somebody from Chesterton saying, hey, I'll get this started. It's not going to happen at all in Chesterton. You know, I mean, NERC's not going to do that. It's going to take somebody in Chesterton to do it. So Jennifer said you had related things in your group. So that might be a good time to pass the mic to you, Jennifer, if you want to be the spokesperson or if there's somebody else from your group.
I would welcome anyone from our group to be the spokesperson.
Be happy to talk. Yeah.
What's that?
So I said I'd be happy to talk about some of that.
Yeah.
Right on, Billy.
Yeah,
I
Eric.
agree. I think so. What we were talking about in ours, Jenny and I are from town of Porter, and Victoria's in Chesterton, and just talking about doing that same thing. Like, how do we get a group going in the town and reaching out to our town council to just start that conversation. But just brought up the idea of, you know, Chesterton, Porter, and Burns Harbor are sort of a tri-town community, and maybe expanding that scope to include all three of those, and maybe, you know, like Porter Beach or Dune Acres are also kind of in our, you know, vicinity. So maybe we make a group that includes residents from each one of those towns. And I agree what you said about the transparency and, you know, the hidden agendas behind having some of those people on those groups. At the same time, if we're making a climate adaptation plan or something of the sort of a sustainability plan, I want to, you know, I feel like it's important as well that sometimes these things are like, oh, we need to, you know, change our light bulbs or drive electric cars or install new windows or insulation in our buildings. And I think that's all like a drop in the bucket if we're not pushing, you know, BP to have a better plan or Cliffs to have a better plan and be reducing their own emissions. I mean, when we look at those graphs of, you know, what causes the emissions and it's transportation and things like that, it's also industry. And if they're not doing anything, me changing my light bulbs is useless. So maybe those people aren't lead in the commission, but those people have to be, you know, involved or heard or talked with as well, because we want to take them along with us in that sustainability plan. You know, we did just hear from Nipsco, and they are trying to do things, and some of those things are driven by, you know, the desire to be doing better in the community and the desire to have a better power grid and energy efficiency and things like that. But it's also because people like us want those things, right? I mean, let's be honest that industries move into green technologies because people demand green technologies, and we're demanding less pollution and we're demanding less impact in our communities. You know, one town will say they don't want to have solar farms or they don't want to have wind farms, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to have the coal plant that's in my town either, you know, but somebody's got to take it somewhere, right? So involve in the community, and I think that those industries and stuff are part of that community, and we need them involved in some way, maybe not the leaders talking to us about what we should do, but maybe the people listening to us about what our concerns are with those industries.
Exactly.
But I would love to pull you in. We basically said that we should, email together and decide who would reach out to these different communities or to town councils and just pitch this idea of, hey, we want to like form a sustainability or a climate adaptation group, and NERPC's doing this thing, and that'll prepare the town for doing something similar, and just start to get that ball rolling, I guess. That makes sense. That was mainly what we talked about in our group, was how do we start something like that?
And we decided that doing Chesterton, Porter, and Burns Harbor together, at least to start out with, would be
Yeah, calling it a tri-town community effort, which I thought was brilliant. Yeah, it's, it is a strong voice.
Porter is very
one of the
small
things
without
that
those
was,
other two places. And I'm in
Exactly.
Porter, but I'm very close to a steel mill that and a train station and all those kinds of things as well, that you smell it in the air, right? There's no boundaries to those things.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And we also talked about how useful it would be to have the content of the meeting that is going to happen in November brought into the discussion with this forum to share with this particular working group community a 1, 2, 3 step process on how to make this happen, providing us with language, who to reach out to, how to get sign off from your town council if that's required, how to stitch it all together to make it successful would be really helpful.
Thank you so much. I don't want to rush anybody. We have about 10 minutes, so that'll leave our groups some time to report. But was there anything else from that last group? We probably have time to handle one more.
This is Jen, and I just wanted to say, the others did a great job of capturing. I was looking at my notes, capturing kind of what we discussed. I was really excited that we had like 3 people in the room that had, could speak to that idea of, I love the idea of kind of joining forces with those communities. So then you have the numbers of citizens. And I was just trying to think of it kind of from a lens of, how can this working group and NERPC and Earth Charters team help them get the resources they need. So I think we'll do some follow-up with that group and take it into consideration when we make the agenda for the next few meetings. If we can invite someone from Michigan City Sustainability or from Highland and provide some of those resources.
Great. And Andy, who had to leave a little bit early, she did sign off on the message before she left. She's on the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. She was, again, one of our speakers at the August 27th meeting. Yeah. And in Michigan City's ordinance of getting their Sustainability Commission put in place, it has, that X number of commissioners are going to be from high school, X number of mayoral appointees, X number of citizen, elected or citizen appointed. I can't recall exactly the wording, but they kind of made sure that they would have different buckets and that different people would be the ones to appoint. And I think they also have maybe staggered, oh boy, my mind has left me, so that everybody wouldn't be leaving their post at one time.
Appointments.
Thank you. Yes, that's it. And Connie, you mentioned that you would be able to share the document that Alex put together.
Yes, I'd like to mention it again. Alex Bazan, who's a sustainability professional in South Bend, and is, his family lives in Highland, and he was in Highland. He has created for us, when we went to our town council to ask them to create a sustainability commission, which is completely resident-led. That's probably why the town council's kind of resistant to establishing it. But anyway, we're forging ahead to ask them to create a commission and with students on board. And Alex has created 2 documents, important documents that I'd be happy to share with people that you can take to your councils. One is a fact sheet that tells why, what a sustainability commission is, what it might do, how it would work, what would the benefits be. And it's a 1-page document, very well laid out, very clear. And then the other thing is Alex went through Sustainability Commission ordinances, the Michigan City one, other cities in Indiana, Richmond, I think is one that had Sustainability Commission ordinances drawn up and commissions created. And so he made a draft, looking at all those ordinances. And so I'd be happy to share those two documents, a fact sheet and a draft of an ordinance that you could take to your town council and say, we would like to do this. And, make it clear that, of course, the council will change some of that ordinance language. They'll take it to their attorney. The attorney will, make some changes, but at least it's something to start with. And I think it would be very helpful.
We have a ask in the chat if you could share a copy of those documents with Olympia. And I wonder if you'd be willing to share those documents for me to share with the entire group.
That's what I was thinking.
Great. Yes, it might take me a while because I'm very tech challenged to get those documents. But can I send them to you, Jennifer, a little bit, after the meeting?
Yeah.
Because I that would be easier for me. So
yeah.
I have copies of those as well. I can email them to Victoria and Eric.
Okay.
Great.
I want to say, Kathy, isn't Valparaiso kind of running their own little commission without any blessing from?
Yeah, I mean, they're not a commission, right? But we did talk about that in our group, kind of seeded by Aaron's question, like, wouldn't it be better if we had sustainability commissions when communities are tasked with implementing a climate action plan? Yes, I think so. But in lieu of that, what is something almost like a good, better, best solution that you can do? I want to give a shout out to Chesterton. I think they were the first city in our region that I'm aware of that enacted a climate resolution, just saying, hey, we acknowledge that climate is a thing and we need to do something about that. And that was a single high schooler from Chesterton High School, Sid. I can't remember Sid's last name right off the top of my head, but he got, like, everybody voted for it, and no problems. And then he took it to Porter and they rubber stamped it, did the same thing. So it all starts somewhere, just to get people talking about it. So I'd say that's the easiest low hanging fruit. I'm not saying it's easy, but with the right spokesperson, at least it gets on the radar. Then a citizen-led group like we have in Valparaiso, it's just, neighbors getting together, and, our mayor doesn't want to have a commission right now. So we're looking for projects that we can do, low-hanging fruit, and hopefully there'll be things that check the boxes of saving taxpayers money, they're good for the environment, and they're things that we, can accomplish without major budget. Honestly, that's another reason that I'm pretty excited to try this climate action team, is if we can kind of harness, all the actions and show collectively what we've done in our individual communities and as a region within this 90-day window. I think that'll be data that we can then kick back and say, hey, this is what we were able to do. We were able to plant this many trees, do this many rain gardens. We're not here to make trouble. We're here to find solutions, And then one other exciting thing that came up is I just attended Earth Charter Indiana's annual Climate Leadership Summit last week, and Alex, who's been mentioned already, was a panelist on that. There were also panelists from other sustainability commissions from around the state, including Bloomington and West Lafayette and Richmond, as was already mentioned. So they shared resources. I don't yet have those emailed to me, but I can add those to our toolkit. So I know we're just almost out of time with about 3 minutes left. So I'm wondering if you could leave in chat kind of how you're leaving the meeting. I know there was a lot to make up for if this was your first meeting. I do want to say there are recordings of all the past meetings. There are slides from all the past meetings. I know it would be a lot to take yourself through to get from that to now, understanding all the science behind the greenhouse gas inventory and everything else. And as has already been offered, there are various people willing to do one-on-one meetings. I think what I heard Aaron say is that IUN is interested in hosting Climate Leadership Summit next year at IUN in Gary. So that would be such a fantastic way to get our sustainability commissions that we'll have newly minted by then, hopefully, or citizen-led groups, or us right here to get there, learn more about it. We'll have incremental progress to celebrate 1 year from now. And I would love nothing more than to have Billy Warren do pay her well to lead us in some kind of an acknowledgement, because she's done an amazing amount of work. If you have the ability to go to the Dunes Learning Center website, you can look at this whole series that she did that was just brilliant on, I hope I'm not
Link in chat.
stepping on any toes here, but is that okay to share, Billy? I watched that whole series that you told me about. I think we have so much resources, and we didn't get to tap into Billy's wisdom. Like, she's coming with so much. She is like just a font of information that we didn't get into, and just the space that we had for this topic wasn't right. But Billy, we want you back here, and we need you for this like next step of engagement, and especially at a regional level. So I just see that happening in Gary, where you're working on your master's, Billy. Isn't that right? Isn't that where you go and you work with Erin? So this could all be a beautiful bow that we tie on this, and we're celebrating a year from now.
I don't disagree. My work is sort of all over the place. I think people often tie it to my indigenous perspective, but that's my love for this land, that my people and my ancestors, this is a Potawatomi region, and I feel very passionate about preserving it, and the cultural genocide that happens in the environment is atrocious. And so I will try to catch up to all the things that are going on, because I'm really hopeful that people like the people on this call all have passion for our environment and our community, just like I do.
Thank you. Well, I know we're at time. If you haven't given us a little sign out note, you can just let us know how this meeting went for you. We do have a lot of things to follow up on. Jen, are there any concluding words you want to say? People are dropping off, probably more Zoom meetings to get to, but
Yeah, no, I'll just say that we will be having more meetings, but we're kind of going to shift the time because our climate fellow, David, he's back in class. And so he can only work with us for a certain amount of time. And we'd really like to have him on the future meeting so he can share out the work that he's been producing. And also, we're going to mine through some of the ideas that we got today to kind of craft the next meeting. So stay tuned, and we'll be announcing the date as soon as possible for the next meetings. And I'll type my contact in the chat just to make sure if any new faces don't have it already. Please reach out. We had limited time here, but always happy to chat.
thank you very much, everyone, for attending.